Ah, that sounds good. Okay, welcome to panel 4. This panel is called Using Fantasy to Overcome Adversity. I'm Dr. Powers. I'll be moderating. Brian will be giving time warnings. I think we can go to 20 minutes if necessary because we have so much time, but 15 is good. So see what you can do, presenters. Our first presenter is going to be Jeffrey Ambrose. Jeffrey is a second-year PhD candidate in IUP's Literature and Criticism program. His primary academic interests are the Harry Potter series and anything horror. He received his MA in English Literature from the University of Vermont and his BA from Chestnut Hill. And he'll be giving us his presentation, Teaching Through Terror, Finding Light Through Darkness in Harry Potter.
All right, cool. Try and share screen here. It's mostly just pictures, so you don't have to look at me the whole time. Okay. Fear, dread, depression. None of these are desired emotional experiences, but they are hallmarks of most popular entertainment. There are tragic romance novels, movies that make you cry, scary films and television shows, and books that make us leave the light on, yet we keep coming back for more. I argue that we love these types of stories and actually find them entertaining because they are never just sad or just dark. These works use horror to give us hope and light. Francis Bacon captured this idea with his famous quotation, "In order for the light to shine so brightly, the darkness must be present." There are two similar quotes in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter books. Dumbledore says, "Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if one only remembers to turn on the light." And Sirius explains to Harry, "We've all got both light and dark inside us. What matters is the part we choose to act on. That's who we really are." Rowling's 7 Harry Potter novels each provide examples of finding light in the face of darkness. The books are unquestionably dark, full of death and monsters, yet they are most known for how they teach readers tolerance and love and compassion. This presentation will explore why and how darkness is employed to make the light in one's life shine brighter. But before we get to Rowling's series, we must first understand the context of the discussion we're entering about fear and horror. There are many classic analyses on why we like scary stories, notably H.P. Lovecraft's essay on the supernatural in fiction and Noel Carroll's The Philosophy of Horror. The current authority on horror, though, is surely Stephen King, himself a fan of Harry Potter, whose scary stories and moralistic fables have been read by hundreds of millions around the world. In his nonfiction, Danse Macabre, Reflections on Why We Enjoy Horror, King explores what we fear and why we keep coming back for more. What King says that I agree with and want you to keep in mind for this presentation is that we do not fear monsters. We fear what we do not know, what could be out there lurking in the dark. Things that scare us do so because they are either aberrations from our normal everyday expectations, or worse, they are exactly the manifestations of those everyday fears of rejection, loss, sadness. But another question remains. Why would we want to read about such things or see them in television or film? The answer for King is that to some degree, somewhere in our minds, no matter how much we have suspended our disbelief, we know we are safe. The creature is not real. There is the figurative zipper at the back of the monster suit. And with that, we turn to Harry Potter. Rowling's books are often dismissed as children's literature with little value, and the works are sometimes called too dark or too occult for young readers. The notion that some readers are too young for these books is especially baffling. Children have grown up on morality stories for centuries, if not millennia, whether it has been biblical stories, Hansel and Gretel and other fairy tales, or Disney cartoons. Many of them contain death, darkness, or torture. But the dark elements are not all that they are. These stories also teach us how to persevere, overcome, defeat those who do wrong with our words or actions, or more often, reactions. The Harry Potter series is a modern example of literature that gives us darkness in order to lead us to light. Even more than Voldemort, the symbol of fear and darkness in the Harry Potter books are the Dementors. They wear all black. Their job is to make prisoners at Azkaban feel no hope or happiness. They literally feed on joy, leaving their victims only with painful, sad, and dark memories and emotions. How awful is that? Their appearance alone instills fear and terror. Even the idea of a kiss is shattered because of the Dementors. Their kiss is sapping the soul out of a victim, killing them, leaving them an empty shell. The book in which we learn about them, Prisoner of Azkaban, has one of the most disturbing moments of the series. Toward the end of the novel, Harry finds Sirius being attacked, as Rowling writes, by at least 100 Dementors. Early in the novel, Harry is attacked by a single Dementor on the Hogwarts Express. It makes him hear his mother's dying scream, and he feels as if he will never be happy again. We see how awful just one Dementor can be. Yet here, Sirius, whom Harry has just learned is part of his family and the last living link to his parents, has over 100 Dementors trying to kill him and Sirius. Even more troubling, Harry has only just learned how to use the spell to ward off a Dementor. And really, he has never even successfully warded one away, because his practice sessions were on the shape-shifting Boggart and not an actual Dementor. So how in the world could a third-year student who has just learned an advanced spell in a safe, controlled environment fight off 100 evil creatures? With love and confidence. The shape Harry sees as he faints at the end of that chapter looks to Harry like his dead father. However, we learn it is Harry himself who arrives on the other side of the water while he and Hermione are using the time turner. There are two ways to understand this, both of them equally profound and beautiful. First is that Harry was able to produce such a powerful Patronus spell because the mere thought of his father is such a happy memory for him, and only recalling a very happy memory can you defend yourself from a Dementor. The second is that Harry realized he needed to perform the spell himself because it is in order to save Sirius, his only living relative of any kind. And they both teach readers of the power of love and confidence. One of Rowling's most brilliant creations in the series is that of the Dementors. They are black without faces and literally steal one's happiness. This is original and interesting in and of itself, but the only way to combat them is to think of happy memories and channel your joy. In this way, Dementors are physical representations of depression. And how does Rowling suggest we do not fall into its traps? By focusing on the good in our lives. Thus, through the Dementors, Rowling teaches a lesson in perspective. To defeat darkness, one must use their inner light. Draco Malfoy and Voldemort are Harry's two foremost enemies in the series. Rowling makes it obvious that these are bad people the second we learn about them. Draco is introduced in the uniform shop on Diagon Alley when Harry is first there. And Draco makes offhand comments about mudbloods, those with one magical parent and one non-magical parent. And at Hogwarts, upon seeing Ron with Harry, Draco mocks Ron's appearance and reveals Ron's family is poor. Thus, Draco embodies some common forms of intolerance, racism, and classism. Voldemort is introduced in the first chapter of the first book. Most wizards fear to even speak his name, which shows Voldemort to be particularly intimidating and evil. Tom Riddle, Voldemort, is obsessed with power and control and does not care about anyone else but himself. He is intolerant of all others and hates muggles for not being able to produce magic, and he possesses disturbing levels of selfishness and narcissism. The Malfoys, as evil and intolerant as they are, hold great esteem in the upper levels of the magical community because of their wealth and influence. With Voldemort, people are afraid to even say his name, yet he has many followers, those either afraid of his power or desirous of their own. Through Draco and Voldemort, Rowling shows that monsters can be created, as Malfoy's father Lucius, at least in the first few books, has an iron grip on his son. Voldemort, we learn through memories in the sixth book, Half-Blood Prince, was an orphan who murdered his parents and abused and stole from the other orphans. Draco and Voldemort were created. Draco by abuse and intimidation from his father, and Voldemort by being created via a love potion and not genuine affection. Voldemort thus serves as the embodiment of pure evil for the series. He is the great darkness, which allows Harry in opposition to him to show us how to become a great light. Characters who teach us to live well and be a good person are plentiful in Rowling series, and on this slide, we have a few of them. Tonks is teased about her ability to alter her appearance. She's in the top left there for anyone not familiar. To alter her appearance, but she does not dwell on it or become a bully of others to offset her own insecurities. She finds confidence and strength through being different and is a powerful ally for the side of good in the series. Luna Lovegood, bottom left here, is an oddball from an odd family with unpopular beliefs and a unique personality. She could have, like Draco, been intolerant of others who do not share her own opinions and viewpoints. Instead, like Tonks, Luna excels while being different. She loves everyone. She is fiercely loyal and quite smart. Through these two characters, Rowling teaches us that it is more than okay to be different. No matter what you look like or what you think, it is about how you respect and tolerate others. The lessons of tolerance and kindness are embodied most by our hero, Harry, in the bottom right, of course. Harry's parents were murdered when he was an infant by Voldemort. And Harry is raised by his aunt and uncle, both of whom, along with their son, verbally and physically abuse and neglect him for 11 years. This could have led him down the same path to evil and darkness that it did Tom Riddle. In fact, there are dozens of articles and book chapters on this very idea. But beautifully, importantly, the opposite occurs. Harry becomes a beacon of hope and light. Harry gets angry, sure, he shows a lack of control of his emotions at times, he breaks school rules, he can be petty and selfish. But everyone does those things, characters in the series and the people reading about them. Harry is not 100% purely good, but that also makes him more grounded and relatable. Thus, as readers, we more easily accept and emulate someone who is like us, someone who does not always win, someone who can have an evil side to them, but someone who ultimately chooses his positive traits and decisions to help steer the direction of his life. There are many examples I would love to share, but for the sake of time, I will examine 3. When Draco is imploring Harry to be his ally at Hogwarts and belittling Ron, whom Harry has just met on the train ride, Harry instantly wins us over with his deadpan remark, "I think I can tell who the wrong sort are for myself, thanks." Harry, who never has had a friend, who has never known love, has never had any type of kind experience, sees in Draco all the negative things he has known with the Dursleys: intolerance, bullying, ego. So he stands up for himself and for Ron, even though he barely knows him, but he can recognize that Ron is someone different, someone actually nice. Then in Half-Blood Prince, Ron joins the Quidditch team as keeper, but he doubts his abilities and is nervous before their first match. Harry, knowing this, makes it look like he put a potion that makes the drinker lucky in Ron's cup. Thus, Ron believes he can save anything because he thinks he is magically enhanced. We learn after the team wins that Harry did not put any of the potion in the cup. He was confident in Ron, but he wanted to teach Ron to be confident in himself. A beautiful, smart storyline through which Rowling teaches us the power of trusting and supporting your friends. As for the final example, we turn to Deathly Hallows, the final book near the end. Crabbe, there with Draco and Goyle, has used Fiendy Fire in the Room of Requirement, trying to hinder and more likely trying to kill Hermione, Ron, and Harry. The spell is too powerful for Crabbe, though, and it quickly gets out of control. Though Crabbe dies, Draco and Goyle are left stranded atop a pile of rubble, avoiding the flames. Harry, Ron, and Hermione have procured broomsticks and are flying out of the room. Harry notices Draco and Goyle, 2 people who have always mocked and abused him. He, like Ron tells him to, could have left them there to die, but he does not. He, Ron, and Hermione fly over and rescue them and get them to safety. Harry had every right to leave them there, especially Draco, for all the times he hurt or, like on the train in Half-Blood Prince, tried to kill Harry. Saving Draco could have meant Draco would then try to kill him again. But Harry is simply not the person to let others or make others suffer. This extraordinary act of kindness and selflessness is a great lesson and echoes the sacrifice his mother Lily made for him. Harry constantly chooses the light inside rather than the darkness. I will keep this final section short, but there are two key points I would like to make. Voldemort does anything he can to gain more power, whether it's killing many people, controlling one's thoughts with a Confundus charm, or torturing anyone who stands up to him. Perhaps the scariest thing about Voldemort is that we do not even know what he wants with power when it could end. He just keeps going, killing and controlling everyone in his way. But why? What is the end game? To see himself as supreme ruler of only people he deems worthy, purebloods? Clear Nazi overtones aside, Voldemort is terrifying because he does not really make sense in his pursuit of power. He is unpredictable while being deadly, and that makes him scary. We see many other examples of abusing power to lesser but no less important degrees in Percy Weasley, Ron's older brother, in his political aspirations at the cost of his family. Fudge's chosen ignorance of the return of Voldemort to keep his position as minister is another example of this. And Lucius Malfoy's pull at the ministry to get Hagrid fired or Dumbledore impeached just because he may get a higher position if it helps his allies. Rowling makes it clear, however, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, as the saying goes. But she, as she so often does, teaches us that we can control power or use it for the right reasons. There are a couple points I'd like to make here, and then I promise I'll wrap up. At the end of the series,
1 minute, Jeff.
okay, Harry's defeated Voldemort and has now possessed the Elder Wand, the most powerful wand ever made. Harry could have used it to great effect for positive means. However, he is aware of the dark path many of its previous owners have gone down, and so Harry is convinced he may become corrupt himself. So he breaks it in half and throws it into the lake. Through this, Rowling teaches us to never give in to impulses of power. We need to let our confidence in our own natural talents and abilities get us where we want and need to be, and not at the cost or detriment of others. And we have come back to our original point. Sure, Rowling admits this series was written for younger audiences. And yes, the books are full of death and darkness and scary moments. But those dark elements are not, as some critics and parents groups would have you believe, encouraging children or adult readers to practice witchcraft or attempt magic. Instead, quite the opposite is true. The Harry Potter series teaches us that doing wrong, being mean, is terrible, and that to be a good person, one must always make the right choice, as difficult as it may be to do so. Readers learn about love, empathy, friendship, controlling power, and doing the right thing. In short, Rowling teaches us to follow light through showing us what embracing darkness can do.
Thank you. Our next presenter, we're holding questions till the end, of course. Our next presenter is Mace Long. Mace is working on his second MA in English Composition and Literature after graduating with an MA in Applied Archaeology in August of 2020 and with an honors history BA degree and 3 minors in anthropology, English, and music in the May of 2018. His scholarly interests include Atlantis myth, Roman and Greek history, Warhammer literature, DC Comics, not Marvel, I guess, Western, horror, science fiction, superhero films, and graphic novels. He will be sharing with us his presentation, The Playable Phoenix in Tabletop Gaming.
Let's see. Yeah. Good afternoon, and welcome to my presentation on the Playable Phoenix in tabletop gaming. With the arrival of the COVID-19 crisis and lockdowns, online communities and gaming stores have seen an increase in tabletop gaming as people struggle to cope. Humans turn toward the exploration of fictional play situations outside of everyday lives. The adaptation of the Phoenix symbol in tabletop gaming focuses on the ability to become reborn after tragedy. The Phoenix has been adopted as a symbol across playable literature. Originating from Greco-Roman mythology, it has since been used as both a literal monster that can be used or fought against, as well as a symbol of healing, life, renewal, and immortality. In times of mass crisis, the use of the Phoenix in gameplay can help players regain a sense of power and knowledge that they can also regenerate in their own way. In Age of Sigmar, a high fantasy setting within the Warhammer universe, there are multiple uses of phoenixes. The Frost and Heart Phoenix and the Flamespire Phoenix, which uses the elements to banish the forces of chaos. These phoenixes can be reborn and regenerated within gameplay. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game has the Sacred Phoenix of Nephthys card with a rebirth ability as the bird can return from the graveyard. Some of Yu-Gi-Oh's cards have a Phoenix mode where they can become reborn or regain lost power. Literature often reflects the concerns, hopes, and fears of people, and playable literature follows this same reflection. The popularity of the Phoenix-game unit, piece, or card in tabletop gaming has recently been adopted to fit the current cultural pulse of a world living in a pandemic. The phoenix has its origins in Greco-Roman mythology. It is a bird that lives for about 500 years before it dies of natural causes. It then resurrects by rising from its ashes to become anew. There were some versions of the myth where the mythical bird bursts into flames and burns up rather than simply die and decay before it is reborn. Since its inception, it has a number of different interpretations from the original folklore. Some examples were how the phoenix was able to, quote, symbolize renewal in general, as well as the sun, time, the empire, metempsychosis, consecration, resurrection, life in the heavenly paradise, Christ, Mary, virginity, the exceptional man, and certain aspects of Christian life, unquote. The player may want to use the phoenix in a specific setting in order to have fun. The player may do it since there is a great amount of fun in it, just like others in a tabletop game. An example from history comes from the lottery that was done in Babylon. It was noted how, quote, the fair and reasonable desire that all men and women, rich and poor, be able to take part equally in the lottery, unquote. Like the lottery of the ancient past, they want a chance to have fun in their own way. The tabletop game Warhammer Fantasy Battle makes use of the Phoenix in both their game and their lore. The Phoenix is used by a faction called the High Elves. They are a faction that is based on the island of Ulthuan and are considered to be the greatest of the elven factions, in comparison to the degenerate Dark Elves and the untamed Wood Elves. The Phoenixes coexist with the High Elves in a number of ways. The Phoenixes live in a place of Ulthuan called the Temple of Asuryan at the Flamespire, which is a collection of stone pillars that is constantly burning. This allows the Phoenixes to live along the elves in a stable and safe environment. Due to the living for a long time at the Flamespire, the Phoenixes were able to attune to the wind of magic called Akshi. This allows the Phoenixes, called a Flamespire Phoenix, to perform feats of fire magic such as firebolts and trails of flame. If a Phoenix were to die in battle, it would burst in a fiery explosion and die like any other creature. If there was enough winds of magic in the area, the pieces of the Phoenix would recombine with each other and allow the Phoenix to be reborn. When a Phoenix ages, it becomes a Frostheart Phoenix. Unlike the Flamespire, the Frostheart Phoenix is attuned with ice magic. However, since it emits a cool and heat-sapping area of effect, the Frostheart Phoenix is sent into exile since the effect causes agony for the other phoenixes. Furthermore, the Frostheart Phoenix gains a hardier body, but loses the ability to resurrect from battle due to having no longer being attuned to the wind of Akshi. The Frostheart Phoenix has a choice of either aging until it dies a frozen statue, fall in battle and unable to resurrect due to age, or become a mount for a powerful elven hero until it ages or is slain in battle. Due to this, the Frostheart fights even harder against the foes of the High Elves, ironically desiring to go out in a blaze of glory, despite being a creature of ice instead of fire. The Phoenixes in High Elf society are linked with the main god of the High Elves, Asuryan. This is due to Asuryan being the Emperor of the Heavens and the creator of the Flame Eternal. The Flame Eternal is a massive fire that resides within the Temple of Asuryan. Its purpose is to provide hope for the High Elves as they, along with the other elven races, are not doing well due to being in a slow decline after losing a devastating war to the Dwarven kingdoms. The Phoenixes help protect the fire along with an elite warrior group of elves called the Phoenix Guard. They are powerful fighters who are clad in enchanted heavy Ithilmar armor and wield powerful star metal halberds. The duties of the Phoenix Guard are to protect the flame along with the Phoenixes and to serve as bodyguards to the male ruler of the High Elves called the Phoenix King. The fire has a symbolic connection where it is used to anoint a new Phoenix King whenever the previous one dies. This is done by having the elected ruler stand in the flame and receive the blessing of Assyrian himself. On tabletop, the Phoenixes are either serving as a flying monster in the rare role or as mounts for a generic elven hero called an Anointed of Assyrian. The Phoenixes are in the rare role due to rarely being needed in battle, as well as to represent their rarity across the world. The Phoenixes in Warhammer Age of Sigmar, the sequel to Warhammer Fantasy Battle, are present in the setting by serving similar roles like in Warhammer Fantasy Battle, while having their lore changed to fit the setting. This time, the Phoenixes are part of a faction called the Cities of Sigmar. This faction consists of the Mortars of the Order Grand Alliance, who are not part of a specific kind of faction. This consists of humans who are not Stormcast Eternal, Durridin who are not Fire Slayers or Karajan Overlords, or elves who are part of the Daughters of Cain, Ideneth Deepkin, Lumineth Realm Lords, or Sylvaneth. They are part of a sub-faction within the Cities of Sigmar called the Phoenix Temple. Another change was the main deity the Phoenixes are a part of. Instead of Assyrian, it is now a being called the Phoenix. The Phoenix is a deity that is considered the new way of hope for the elves due to its connection to rebirth and life. The Phoenixes have a new home at a city called Phoenicium that is located within the realm of life called Gyron. This area was originally a pair of ruins within large amounts of sap until the Phoenixes melted away the sap and allowed settlers to occupy the ruins and build the city of Phoenicium. Their connection with the Phoenix Guard was changed as well. Now the Phoenix Guard consists of elves who were originally broken in mind and body during the Age of Chaos, but were reborn anew due to the power of the Phoenixes. The elves, now healed of all wounds, both physical and psychological, were then inducted into the Phoenix Guard and became stout warrior champions of the Phoenix Temple. There was a change to the Frostheart Phoenixes, where now their ice magic comes from a rare select few Phoenixes, rather than due to old age. The tabletop game has the Phoenixes serve as the same role as their previous counterparts with a single difference. This involved the role of a basic Phoenix, rather than a rare role, are now in a role called Other. This is to show that Phoenixes are more common across the realms, rather than flocking to a single spot. The science fiction version of Warhammer, called Warhammer 40,000, makes use of the Phoenix, but mainly for its powers and symbolism rather than the actual creature themselves. These are a group of individuals called the Phoenix Lords. They are part of a faction called the Craftworld Eldar. These Eldar are legendary heroes of old who saved many Eldari during the collapse of their empire during the 30th millennium. The Phoenix Lords went further and helped establish Craftworlds, which are massive spaceships capable of holding an entire planet's worth of people. The Phoenix Lords then established aspect shrines where warriors dedicated to a specific form of combat are trained. After stabilizing the Craftworld Eldar, the Phoenixes then traveled the universe and went on adventures to try and not only save the Eldari, who were dying as a species after the collapse of their empire, but to possibly re-establish their empire of old. Unlike Warhammer Fantasy Battle or Age of Sigmar, the Phoenix Lords are part of the Eldar God of War and Fire, Kayla Menchik Cain, or Cain for short. Each of the Phoenix Lords represents Cain in a specific aspect of his being. There are 7 known Phoenix Lords. The first one is the overall leader of the group, Asuraman. His warriors are called Dire Avengers, who specialize in being an all-purpose jack-of-all-trades warrior. He represents Cain as the noble warrior. Next is Jane Zar, whose warriors are called Howling Banshees. They specialize in being shock troops who are sprinting to the front line and cause havoc with their melee weapons and psychic screams. She represents Cain as the Wailing Doom. Third is the youngest of the group, Baharov. His warriors are named Swooping Hawks, and their specialism is flying around the battlefield, giving cover fire and finishing off weakened enemies where they are needed. He represents Cain as the precise predator. Another is Karandras, whose warriors are called Striking Scorpions. They are melee specialists like the Howling Banshees, but prefer to ambush their targets rather than charge straight at them. Karandras represents Cain's aspect as the Silent Hunter. Fourth is Fugen and his warriors, the Fire Dragons. They focus on destroying enemy war machines, fixed positions, and powerful monsters. His aspect of Cain is that of a force of destruction. The sixth Phoenix Lord is Malgun Ra, and his fighters who are called Dark Reapers. Their specialty is a mixture between Dire Avengers and Fire Dragons, where they go after heavy infantry and light vehicles. Malgun Ra represents Cain as an inescapable death. The final known Phoenix Lord is Irilith. His combatants are called Shadow Specters, who specialize in using their jump packs to get away from fast approaching infantry and vehicles while raining fire upon them. Irilith represents the aspect of Cain as an eternal warrior, even after death. There are several more Phoenix Lords. One is a fallen Phoenix Lord named Ahra. He is the original founder of the Striking Scorpions until he went berserk and had to be defeated by Karandras. There are various versions of why Ahra went crazy, such as succumbing to his own bloodlust, to falling to the worship of the chaos god of blood and slaughter, Khorne. Since then, Ahra has disappeared, his ultimate fate being unknown. There is a missing Phoenix Lord named Drastana, who founded the Shining Spears. The Shining Spears specialize in riding jet bikes and act as futuristic versions of cavalry. He represented Cain's aspect as the Lightspeed Blade. Drastana is missing due to being responsible for causing the first death of a Sermon, when he went ahead of battle and got separated, when a demon called a Keeper of Secrets killed a Sermon. Drastana managed to avenge a Sermon, but felt guilty for what he did and went into a self-imposed exile, his current whereabouts unknown. There are two unknown Phoenix Lords who created the Crimson Hunters and Warp Spiders. The Crimson Hunters specialize in aircraft and represent Cain as the Blinding Blades. Warp Spiders make use of equipment that teleports themselves over short distances for critical strikes and defending important Eldar leaders. They represent Cain as an eternal guardian of the Webway and the Eldar. The Phoenix Lords have a connection with the mythical creature Phoenix with their ability to resurrect should they be slain in battle. This is possible due to wearing a unique set of armor called Phoenix Armor. This allows the soul of the original wearer to be preserved. The Phoenix Lord is then resurrected when another dons the armor themselves. This does cause the new wearer to have their body, mind, and soul be completely overwritten by the original user, causing them to lose all awareness of their past self. The candidates are usually done by selecting the best of the Phoenix Lord's chosen aspect warriors called Exarchs, who train to be able to become a host for the Phoenix Lord. The only exceptions are Baharoth and Malgun Ra, who are confirmed to be alive as of the present setting. On the tabletop, the Phoenix Lords are powerful characters who help a craft role themed army according to their specialty. This could be eliminating infantry with a Sermon, hunting down vehicles with Fugen, or flying around with Baharoth. Each Phoenix Lord also gives bonuses to their respective aspect warrior when they are near each other. Some examples are Jane Zar, allowing Howling Banshees to fight first, Karandras helping Striking Scorpions gain extra attacks, and Malgun Ra guiding Dark Reapers with being able to reroll hit rolls of 1 during shooting or combat. The card game Yu-Gi-Oh! Makes use of the Phoenix in its card game. One example is the card called Sacred Phoenix of Nephthys. This is a monster card that is similar to the mythical creature of old, where it is able to return to the graveyard once per turn.
Mace,
With the
I'm sorry to
Oh.
interrupt, Mace. Just one more minute, please. That's all right.
Okay.
Just one.
You might want to just move towards your conclusion.
And then the Winged Dragon of Ra has a Phoenix mode that allows it to burn away the enemy, its opponent's monsters. In conclusion, there was a variety of usages with the myth of the Phoenix on the tabletop. Each interpretation makes use of the Phoenix in combat while using their powers in a different way. The Fantasy Battle in Age of Sigmar added on to the Phoenix by creating a Phoenix that uses ice instead of fire and has them be used as mounts. Warhammer 40,000 uses the Phoenix in a metaphorical sense, with the Phoenix swords having similar powers. Yu-Gi-Oh! Used the Phoenix in its card and has a powerful card make use of a mode that is similar to the burning effects of a Phoenix. Each interpretation shares a common trait of constantly rising from the ashes. This helps the player to rise up against their current difficulties, whether it be COVID-19 or a similar event where the player is inspired to keep going on. Thank you.
Thank you. For the final presentation in this panel, Sarah Victor is going to share with us. She is a PhD candidate in the Literature and Criticism program at IUP. She is an international student and belongs to Pakistan. She has a BA in English Literature from Punjab University in Pakistan, an MA in Creative Writing from Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. She will be sharing her presentation, Storytelling as a Response to Adversity in Haroun and the Sea of Stories by Salman Rushdie.
Thank you, Dr. Powers. I'll share my screen. Okay, not that. So, like my colleague Mace just mentioned, the whole pandemic, that's what got me into this concept of storytelling to face our adverse circumstances. And when I came across Rushdie's novella, Haroun and the Sea of Stories, I could see the relation between these two things. So my interpretation is a neo-historicist and post-colonial interpretation of the story. We all know Salman Rushdie, he needs no introduction, but what's important here is that he wrote this novella soon after going into exile, after, self-imposed exile, I would say, after the fatwa was issued against him for satanic verses. Teverson is one of the critics who has analyzed this novel, and he has traced at least two influences on this work. One is 1001 Nights, and the other is by a Persian writer. The Persian name of the title of the work is Mantak-e-Tayr. Tayr means birds, and Mantak means congregation, so the English translation of it is the congregation of birds. What are the commonalities between the two works? One with 1001 Nights, Sherazade is a storyteller, as we all know, and she escapes death by her art of storytelling. She tells a new tale every night to delay the beheading, so to speak. And Fariduddin also, that's the author of Mantak-e-Tayr, he went to exile because of the fatwa that was issued against him after his work, Mantak-e-Tayr. And Mantak-e-Tayr figures birds, so does Haroun and the Sea of Stories. A quick synopsis of the story. Haroun and the Sea of Stories is a children's novella that can be classified as a quest story because its main lead character, Haroun, goes on a quest and has a series of adventures. The novel is set in a fictional city where sadness reigns, and because of that sadness, which is manufactured in factories, it is now called City of Sadness. The people have forgotten the real name of this place. They're so sad. There was once in the city, in the country of Aleph Bay, a sad city, the saddest of cities, a city so ruinously sad that it had forgotten its name. It stood by a mournful sea full of glumfish, which were so miserable to eat that they made people belch with melancholy, even though the skies were blue. So nothing really helped them, except for one person, and I'll mention that as I go along. The person is Rashid Khalifa. He's like a superhero whose superpower was the ability to spin fantastical stories, and he seemed to have an endless supply of those stories. He always had a new spin on each story, and they were never the same. This is what helped the people along. And the crisis of the story begins when Rashid's wife elopes with their neighbor who despises Rashid for his storytelling, and his son is so affected by his mom's desertion of him that he sort of absorbs Mr. Sen Gupta's views, and he shouts at his dad saying, "What's the point of it? What's the use of stories that aren't even true?" This affects his father, and Rashid loses ability to tell stories. Rashid is soon after hired to speak at a political rally to please the people and make them vote for that candidate. Rashid is unable to speak or utter any stories. So he's disappointed, and he sort of disclaims his need for storytelling, or gives up on the act of storytelling. As a result, it offends the fictional sources that Rushdie has created in this whole setting. Rashid's ability for storytelling comes from a moon that's rotating around the earth and where stories are created, and Rashid, by losing his faith in storytelling or his own ability to tell stories, sort of ends his subscription. And that's the word that Rushdie uses in the novel. Kahani is the name of the moon, and Kahani means stories. It's a word taken from the Urdu language or Hindustani language. And Harun goes to Kahani by some fantastical means, flying on a bird, on the back of a mechanical bird, and there he gets involved in a crisis that's taking place on the moon Kahani between the leader of two nations. The moon is occupied by Chupwalas and Guppies. Guppies are all for freedom of speech, for storytelling, and they love just debating on things. Khatam Shud, who is the leader of the Chupwalas, wants to usher in a reign of silence where nobody's allowed to talk. And he hates stories. He wants to poison the source of stories, that's the ocean of stories, and block its source where the story waters are coming from. So Harun gets involved in this and helps the people of the Guppies to regain their source of stories again. So in all of this, what I gleaned was the need for storytelling. And that goes back to how people deal with adversity in their lives. When poor people can't, feed their children, many mothers divert their attention by telling fantastical tales. That's something that we see in the classic story of the Little Match Girl, where she's so hungry and she's dying of cold, she spins a yarn in her mind for herself, where she's partaking of a fabulous dinner and she dies happy. So Rashid's endless supply of stories helps the people of the city of sadness to get through their daily grinding routines. If Rashid can't tell stories, not only does he face physical threat to his person from the political candidate who hired him, but he also loses his power or his ability to help his people. So this is an allegorical representation of what happens in a lot of dictatorial regimes around the world. Rashid is a representative of an author. His inability to tell stories is something that results in from censorship when it's imposed on authors and their works. The two nations of Guppies and Chupwala represent two forms of government. The Guppies, with the freedom of discourse, are obviously democratic, and the Chipwalas are the dictatorial or states that have a dictator reigning who's tyrannical and oppressive. So the polarities that exist in these two scenarios or these two states represent light, freedom of speech, and unity, and the Guppies are all for that. So much so that before they go into battle with the Chipwalas, they debate every stratagem that their general has thought of, and they debate endlessly over that. And Harun, as a listener, is annoyed and he thinks, are they ever going to go into battle and actually do something? But Chipwalas, on the other hand, have taken an oath of silence where they have not discussed anything. They know they're going into war, but no strategy has been laid out for the soldiers. As a result, what happens when the two forces come against it is that the Chipwalas don't trust each other. There's chaos in their ranks and they lose a battle. Of course, there's other things that go help the Guppies to win the battle, but that's the main thing that help or brings about their fall. So, as my conclusion, I have realized this that stories are very often an imaginative expression of our deepest desires. Rushdie in this story was giving in to his own need to restore his faith in storytelling. His storytelling got him into so much trouble that he had to leave his homeland, leave his extended family, friends, everything, and go into hiding for a while. As a result, he was going through stress, anxiety. He needed to tell a story again to alleviate that. As I brought up the Little Match Girl again, sometimes it's just the physical circumstances of hunger or pain that bring us to this need to distract ourselves. And then storytelling is also sometimes a means to escape harsh reality. Storytelling is an expression of the freedom of speech, which is something that Rushdie celebrates in this novel. There's a lot of things that can be gleaned from this novel, but this is the main thing that I picked up. And with that, I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Wonderful. That was very inspiring and wonderful to hear such great presentations about the hope, the alternatives, the beauty, and I guess escapism sometimes that fantasy can bring us. If there are questions, if there are people who would like to ask a question but don't feel like they want to talk on Zoom right now, you can ask them in the comments, as Brian wrote in the beginning. And so take it away. Questions for our panelists.
I will start. Mace, I was totally fascinated with your presentation on the Phoenix, significant symbol. And I'm going to ask this question because I haven't thought about this in table gaming. How significant is the symbol of the Phoenix? Would you say it's one of the most ubiquitous symbols or top 5 symbols in gaming? I was curious your take on that, and if not, what are some other symbols in gaming that seem to be incorporated into the culture? I was just curious your thoughts.
I would say that the Phoenix is easily in one of the top 5, like, most recognizable, mythical creatures in basically any fantasy setting. Like, you could basically have, a giant bird that's on fire and people go, oh, hey, that's the Phoenix. They're all about, resurrecting and various other symbolisms. And then, of course, as I mentioned, some fantasy settings, such as fantasy battles, they may, add on to the interpretation, but they still have the same core value of, resurrection, eternal life. And then for other mythical creatures, it's definitely along with others, such as, take dragons, for example, is another one that's along with phoenixes, where the dragon may either represent, such as in Lord of the Rings, basically greed at its worst, while in other settings, they may represent, the noble fighting spirit of humanity.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. Other questions? I want to open it up to other people. All right, Jeff, I'm going to throw it at you. How does the Phoenix represent itself in the Harry Potter series, if at all? Is it significant in the Harry Potter series? Is Harry Potter a Phoenix character, perhaps, maybe?
Well,
Yeah.
absolutely. We have the Resurrection Stone. But yeah, of course, in the second book and more often the film that people have seen that version, Fawkes the Phoenix is not really the pet of Dumbledore, though he keeps Fawkes in his office. But when Harry is about to die, as he almost does in every book, nice, friendly children's literature, the Phoenix comes down to the Chamber of Secrets and restores him, cures the poison that's about to kill him with its tears, and then because of its other mythical quality of strength, is able to carry them out of the chamber, which otherwise they might not have been able to get out of. And then, as you mentioned in the chat, yes, the Order of the Phoenix, the group put together to combat Voldemort and his followers, big and small, in the first great Wizarding War that they had to make their stand against Voldemort. And the Order of the Phoenix is, yeah, about rising up against adversity, literally. So the theme of our conference, yeah.
I'd like to add Sarah's birds to the conversation about, of course, we have Brian Satu, and the Phoenix, wonderful symbol we all recognize, but and also for the other panelists afterwards, birds in general represent flight, freedom. Did you tie that in with the theme of the Phoenix, Sarah, or was it a coincidence?
It was just a coincidence. I didn't make that connection until you just brought it up. But yes, birds are the means that bring Harun to that moon. They fly on the back of a mechanical bird that has a computer sort of brain. It doesn't have a lot of feelings, but that's his means of transportation. And that's what brings him back to Earth as well.
Mhm.
He couldn't get anywhere without those birds. I mean, on Earth, yes, but to be able to commute or go from one reality to another, he needed those birds. And the birds are also part what transport them on the moon itself. So they have a very important role to play.
Nice. Flights of fancy, right?
I think
Yes,
of
flights of fancy.
Stephen King's It as well. One of the manifestations of Pennywise is a giant bird, but then also one of like the magical forms to combat Pennywise is the mere mention of birds. They say sparrow, and it is like offensive. It hurts, it wounds Pennywise. So using birds as the symbol of, again, flying away, escaping, rising up, to show resistance is definitely all throughout literature.
How did each of you choose what to talk about? Were they childhood interest? Are they just sort of things you've seen recently? Jeff, I mean, Harry Potter, but
Yeah, originally I was actually going to talk about the Order of the Phoenix, using unity as a form of resistance in the time of Umbridge, and how they manifest as Dumbledore's army in the fifth book. But yeah, I could wax forever about Harry Potter. So
I've heard many
um,
times that Dolores Umbridge is more hated than Voldemort by fans.
oh
She's
yeah,
a
for sure.
very dictatorial and cruel professor who comes to Hogwarts and prevents freedom of speech, right? So
Yeah.
what about you, Mace? Are you have you been a gamer all along? Is it something that came up during COVID for you?
For me, like I looked at the top of the Phoenix, I thought, because one of my favorite tabletop games is basically the Warhammer universe, and I thought, oh yeah, there's phoenixes, in Fantasy Battle and Age of Sigmar, and then I looked more into it. They use more and more, and also this of the phoenix as well. For example, there's the symbolism also used in Warhammer 40,000, even though a physical phoenix is not present, but they still use its symbolism, whether it's, its literal powers, such as, resurrecting, or symbolizing as the last hope for the Eldari, who in the setting of Warhammer 40,000 are a dying species and need like a new symbol of hope in order to be reborn and hopefully not only save their species, but reestablish their empire of old.
Yeah. Sarah, do you want to talk about Hunger Games? I saw you mention it.
Yeah, I just made that connection when I saw Mesa's image of the burning phoenix,
Mm,
and it clicked that image of her dress, the flaming dress that she wears in the movies. So the third part, I think, and I was like, is there a connection between the two? Was that dress inspired by the myth of the burning phoenix? So, and how she's the one who's actually able to defeat the system. So that's a powerful image. And yeah, that's how I made that connection.
That's the best thing about conferences is making connections with other people you hear expressing themselves and having ideas. It's wonderful. Are there any final questions for the panel, or should we move on to the final?
Well, before we do, Dr. Bowers, I'd actually like to point out Dr. Williamson, who actually, if you do not know, everyone that's present, he is part of the PA English program, and I figured he would like to talk about publication opportunities via this conference. So, Dr. Williamson, if you could, I'd like to hear a little bit from you as well.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the presentations. I have a lot of questions, but I try to keep quiet and let other people talk in these situations. Yeah, but I'm the editor of Pennsylvania English, which is a journal that publishes poetry, fiction, nonfiction, and critical essays. And we would like to invite you to submit your work to Pennsylvania English. I had the link up, but I seem to have lost it. So I'm not very good at talking and typing at the same time, nor can I chew gum at the same time.
Let me see if I can find that for you, Dr. Williamson. You keep talking, I'll find it for you.
I'll get the link and you talk, okay? So if somebody could sort of think about, those of you who have been through the peer review process, those of you, Sarah, if you got an MFA, what's it like to submit your creative work? What's it like to submit critical work? If you can think about some of the processes and talk about that with one another really quickly, that would be great.
Well, peer reviewing, the way we did it for our creative writing classes was just sitting in a group where you brought your work to share, and you had like this, you had to find a few things that they needed to revise, but you had to cushion it with what was good and what needed improvement, and then how they should go about improving their work. So that's what we did for the
That's
creative
great.
writing.
Yeah, with publishing, it works a little bit differently. You submit your creative work and they either like it or don't. And I put the link there to Pennsylvania English submissions. And generally, most journals will not give you feedback on your creative work, but will give you feedback on your critical work. So even if an essay is not accepted, you will get feedback at least from the editor, if not to peer reviewers. And these are external reviewers. So it's a really interesting public process, one in which creative work, unlike in an MFA, does not get anything other than a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And I think we accept 1.5% of what we get. It's a very small percentage. However, critical work gets a lot of attention. And that's just the way journals work. There aren't that many journals that combine creative and critical work. And Pennsylvania English is a pretty unusual one in that respect. We've had really interesting contributors, including the former anchor of 60 Minutes, Malta's, the top Maltese poet. It's a really eclectic group. And our covers are always noted. We have usually very interesting cover artists. So I have the link there for submissions, and welcome you to submit your work. Please do. Thank you.
If I can add on to that, Dr. Williamson, I'd like to suggest that it may be a nice event or process for EGO after this conference for all of you to exchange papers and give each other some feedback before thinking of moving forward to publication, since we've had this really wonderful sort of intimate conference over today and yesterday, to take some of the ideas and resonances that you've experienced, some of the epiphanies, and work with each other, both with the critical work and with the creative work. Len Lawson yesterday, I think, spoke very eloquently about getting feedback and sharing and finding others to help you. And I think that this works with creative and critical alike, and would be a really wonderful follow-up to this wonderful conference.
That's right. The difference between giving a conference paper and publishing something is enormous. There are far more revision steps than you know, but it's worth doing because you're constantly talking to people. This conference presentation is just the beginning of what you do. It is not the sort of, oh, I'm finished, I've given my paper, now I can relax. No, you can't. Now it's time to get to work. And get to work in a much more public forum. So thank you, Dr. Holm. I was hoping you would say something like that. It's wonderful.
Great. Right. The conference, as we say all the time, I think in our professionalization, I don't know how we should put it, in our professionalization religion of Dr. Williamson and I, is that the conference is where we share our ideas. Right? But we share our ideas, I think, respectfully and humbly, with the hope that we will get help with them. And so I think that we've had this wonderful sharing opportunity with this great community. And the next step, right, is for all of you to give that assistance, to give that feedback to each other, so that you can move on to the next intellectual step of progression with your work and your ideas. And that's all I have to say about that.
I would like to build off of what Dr. Holm just said. I was really amazed how intertwined all these ideas were about the idea of the Phoenix, how everyone came from very disparate situations and different perspectives, yet there's that underlying common theme throughout all the presentations themselves. And I thought that was really, really fascinating, listening to and seeing how similar my ideas were, as and in conjunction to what Mace was talking about, Sarah, Jeff, Olivia. I mean, it's just really, really amazing how there's that, we feel so separate, but then we have conferences like this that do make us remind ourselves how connected we are. So I thank everyone for partaking and sharing.
Well, then I think with those wonderful words from Brian, maybe I will move forward to some of our closing remarks and get some more conversation on the unity of these ideas, maybe collected and put a little more formally. So I'm going to try to share a PowerPoint. That doesn't mean it will work, but I'm going to try. Did it happen? Is it there? Great. Okay, so first I want to thank everybody for this amazing collection of ideas that's been so generative. And I think that's such a great keyword in thinking of the Phoenix, right? It's been so generative that from all of these different directions and approaches and contexts, so many interesting ideas have come to fruition, so many wonderful conversations have been had. And obviously this didn't just happen, that this is the reflection not only of all of your individual intellectual work of the past weeks and months, but also of the very serious practical work that has been done by your EGO officers to make this happen. So I want to extend a huge thank you and congratulations to all of the hard work on all sides of this conference. It's been a wonderful event to witness and to now participate in. And just threading together of the last few days, I think we've seen some wonderful approaches, however different, by looking at the advantages of how the existential and the phenomenological come as ways of overcoming. Overcoming as rising to challenges in our workplace, in our daily life, and in our spiritual practice. Art as a way of self-resurrecting or overcoming in a displaced space. A review of historical repetitions of the adverse in the human story, and a reflection on ways of escaping or overcoming those cycles of history. And largely something like a shared philosophical approach to potentiality and change. And it's with those terms I'd like to dive a little deeper into these notions of adversity and the spirit of the phoenix, into some small remarks that I'm noting as the adverse, the phoenix, and the turn. So our conference has reflected on, I think, two adjacent concepts, adversity or the adverse and the phoenix. And the adverse, we think of something with triumph with respect to the adversarial, right? As an overcoming or a resistance in an active way. And the phoenix unfolds as something like a mythological emblem, right? Arising from the ashes, right? Born anew again, but also different. And I want to put a little bit of pressure on this notion of difference. Right? When the phoenix is born, it's not the same phoenix. It's kind of like I was thinking about this last night and talking with my 4-year-old son, or now 5-year-old son who's turned 5, about this concept. And he said, well, this is like Groot, right? Groot from the Avengers, that baby Groot is not the same as the Groot before, right? Fox, the phoenix, when he regenerates, is not the same Fox, but he's not a different Fox either. Right? There's a thread that continues in that cycle of change. Right? So when we think of simple as a spirit of overcoming, right? Our narrative is sort of this rising up, of going above things. But we also have something like the cycle of the phoenix, which is an ineluctable cycle of crisis and change, which we can think of just simply being one of escape and return, but I think more fluidly as something like this change of position, of beginning in one place and cycling through and ending up somewhere different, somewhere esoteric, somewhere beyond where we were before. And this sense of the thread of the continuity between the change, between where one was and where one goes in this this facing or this confrontational, this struggle with adversity of overcoming, really reminded me of this small section from Paracelsus by Robert Barrett Browning, which I'll just take a moment to read out here, and you can of course read along with. Right? At times I almost dream I too have spent a life the sage's way, and tread once more familiar paths. Perchance I perished in an arrogant self-reliance ages ago, and in that act of prayer, for one more chance went up so earnest, so instinct, with better light let in by death, that life was blotted out, not so completely, but scattered wrecks enough of it remain, dim memories, as now, when once more seems the goal inside again. I think perhaps taken out of context, but Dr. Williamson can correct me as our resident 19th centuryist. But we can take from Browning's thinking of Paracelsus here, his externalizing of his internal thoughts and reflection, this question of How do we transition? How does one move from a state of before to a state of after? What struggle, what remains, what is lost? And how do we see ourselves on separate ends of that spectrum? When thinking of this, I wanted to think of the notion of the adverse a little bit more concretely, of thinking of how we not just how we respond to adversity, but how we verse or how we turn, how we change, and how we move. The spirit of the phoenix, right, is always one of change, but change or mutability facilitated by crisis, right? The phoenix doesn't simply become, right? There's a violence to this. There's a burning, there's a destruction, there's an apocalyptic nature to this change that is not simply sui generis, right? But has to do with an external world and leaves a residue in this external world. Crisis is a concept reliant on the adverse. Right? Something adverse needs to happen to foment crisis. And adverse itself is a kind of change or a turn. Right? When we think of adversity, I wanted to look a little bit more closely at the term itself, the adverse. Right? The adverse, or the Latin adversus, right, has two parts to it: the against, the ad, and the vertere, the turn. And one understanding, right, as something that it is turned against us, right, unjustly or unfairly, or something that is turned against or away from the ideal, right, bordering something like on the perverse. Right? And so we have this concept of the turn or turning embedded in our notion of the phoenix, or the spirit of the phoenix, or the rising above in adversity. And so in looking at these terms, right, we have, of course, the adverse, to turn against, but we have a variety of other different types of terms that I think are worth bringing in to this notion of change and becoming. Right, we have the animadverse, right, which is the turning of the mind to something, or the critique against. We have the converse, right, which is to turn with, or to turn dispose, or to convert. The diverse, right, which is to turn in separate ways, or to divert. The inverse, right, to turn inside out. And the obverse, right, to turn until facing. The perverse, to turn away from, nominally to turn away from the good. And the universe, the universum, right, which is the turning together into one. What I noted in doing this sort of philological treasure hunt is that the changes in relation, the turns always have a preposition. There is always a change in relation to an other. So the personal crisis, we might say, the personal crisis of the phoenix is dependent on and facilitated by a change of relations or relationality, right? Which is that turn always will facilitate another crisis. The phoenix cycle is not merely personal, it's not independent, and it is not autonomous. Rather, it's embedded in a continual constellating and reconstellating of self and other, in which one is given a turn, or takes a turn, or creates a turn to be taken by others. And I think in sorting through these different positions and these different relations, right, what remains simply at the end of all of this thought and all this discussion, right, is to ask ourselves if we're going to turn from where and to whom, not simply into what. With this notion of change, I wanted to end with some pressure on a poem by Percy Shelley, Mutability, which I think is the key, the internal and the external mutability and the changing relationships between them as the pivot points of this two-day conference. So Shelley writes, "We rest, a dream has power to poison sleep. We rise, one wandering thought leaves the day. We feel, conceive or reason, laugh or weep, embrace fond will, or cast our cares away. It is the same, for be it joy or sorrow, the path of its departure still is free. Man's yesterday may never be like his morrow, naught may endure but mutability. That ends my remarks. Thank you for giving me the chance to comment on these wonderful proceedings that we've had in the last few days. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Holm. At this point, Dr. Williamson, do you want to kind of talk about Pennsylvania English in a little bit more detail, or do you think you've covered everything you want to say about that?
I think, well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Holm. I think that will be the opening speech for the Myth Collaborative. I hope as well. Really wonderful connection between the conference and your concluding remarks and the Myth Collaborative, which Dr. Holmes serves as co-director of the Myth Collaborative at IUP. You'll be hearing a lot more about that. It's more than just some paint and furniture in 506 Humanities and Social Sciences building. And if you like that presentation, which I did tremendously, then please come and keep your eye on Myth Center events, because you will get more of that from Dr. Holm. Wonderful work. I hadn't really prepared anything more for Pennsylvania English.
Okay.
I think, because everything is done by peer review, I do, and by, rather than by invitation, I do urge you to submit your work through the submittable link that I sent. Please contact me ahead of time before you do submit your work. Make sure that it sees more people's eyes, and that people are able to tell you, cut this, you're drifting here, tighten this up, focus on this. It's very similar. I mean, you're going to be doing this writing, a lot of you, in various stages, in various ways. So it's very important to have that kind of crucible of revision that is a work that you submit for publication. Had you anything more in mind, Kim? Was there something I was missing?
No, I just wanted to give you that opportunity to kind of plug that for anybody who might be interested. So
thank you.
I think.
And there is another opportunity too. Dr. Holm and I are going to edit a journal. We're going to revive a journal that has been dormant
Awesome.
and will burst into flame. And after 22 years, I think, the Myth Journal at IUP, Aristea, has got a little bit more, as it were, air under its wings. And so we will be letting it loose soon. So I think also those of you who presented at this conference might want to look out for that, and you might want to think about work related to myth.
That's fantastic.
And I think, Dr. Holmes, remember this is recorded, so Dr. Holmes' concluding remarks you will be able to review, and you will be able to use as a kind of a theoretical base from which to pursue further work. Very important that you think of really wonderful presentations like that as a springboard for you, as a focusing agent for you.
Great. Thank you. And on that note, I just want to give a few kind of final comments of my own. First of all, thank you to everybody who presented in this conference. All 4 panels were extraordinary and above and beyond anything I could have expected for a virtual conference. So it's been very awesome to see all of this kind of come together. And I appreciate all of your guys' contributions to it, even in a time where it's extremely stressful, not only maybe in your semesters, but also because of a worldwide pandemic. And you really showed the conference theme throughout all of your panels of, responding to this adversity in a positive way. And bringing forward some really great scholarship for us to all consider and continue the conversation with. I also want to thank all of my fellow officers who are here who have helped to put all this together. Honestly, without them, none of this would be possible. I feel like I'm giving like a Grammy speech right now. But I really appreciate all that you have to do. Thank you to Dr. Holm, too, our acting advisor right now, for just constantly supporting us, giving us feedback where we needed it, as well as Dr. Williamson, who has served as our EGO advisor in the past as well, for kind of supporting all of us and in this endeavor. Some final thoughts. We will be going into our virtual reception, which is the same link. So if you'd like to stick around and kind of chat with people, either about what they talked about or just kind of get to know and connect, make those connections, that's what this opportunity is. We have a reservation at Levity in town here for anybody who is in town. So at 1:30, you'll be able to get into Levity and kind of, that's when our reservation is. So ideally try not to get there too much before that, just to respect them. But we hope that all of you who are in the Indiana area are going to be able to make it. Obviously, masks are required in and around, but not to be eating.
Kimberly, let me follow up. Sorry, really quick. I'll follow up. Levity also has made arrangements to socially distance us as well. So if you're nervous about being too close, they will be accommodating a larger group, but they'll be able to space us out. So please feel comfortable and safe in coming out to Levity, so you won't feel too entrapped and enclosed by others. I just want to make that point for those that are a little conscientious and concerned. So I just wanted to.
I'll be
ahead,
there
Kim,
in
sorry.
spirit.
Thanks. And so also, if you are not already following us on social media, please do so. That's kind of where we give all of our updates. We also do through our IUP email as well. But if you want to stay the most up to date, it's going to be through our social media platforms. On Facebook, we're IUP English Graduate Organization, and on Instagram, we're IUP Grad Ego, just like our email address. But with that, if we want to take 5 minutes to just kind of decompress and get off the screen, feel free to do so, or you can stick around for the virtual reception. Since we ended a little bit early, we'll have a little bit more than that half-hour gap of time that we had. But once again, just thank you for attending, and I hope you guys had a enriching experience as I did.